All right, welcome everybody to tonight's card meeting. There is a sign-up sheet circulating around, so if you haven't signed that yet, you want to like raise your hand, we can try and target you for this gentleman who just came in. All right. We'll go down and do quick introductions. I'll start and then we'll go this way around. I'm Jenni Conn, public health engineer for Washington County Health Department. And I'm also acting like moderator for CARD.
I'm Jim Schultz, concerned citizen, member of CARD.
Marcia Haddock, Scio resident, concerned citizen.
Beth Taylor, Scio resident.
Al Bailey, Scio resident. Vince Crusoe, CARD board member and coordinator member for the Elm Street Watershed Group.
Jason Maciejewski, County Commissioner, District 1, inclusive of Scio Township.
I'm Jackie, I'm on Ann Arbor City Council.
I'm Dan Hamel, I'm the EGLE project manager for the Gelman site.
Roger Rayle, chair of CARD and chair of Scio Residents for Safe Water.
Beth Collins, secretary of CARD.
Kathy Griswold, Ann Arbor City Council.
Katie Jositis from Congresswoman Dingle's office.
Rita Locke Caruso, Ann Arbor resident.
Kathy Knowles, Scio trustee.
Bob Hyde, Scio Township president.
James DeMore, member of CARD.
Jump to the back row for introduction.
Speak up.
This is my first time to the meeting, and I don't know what CARD stands for.
Coalition for Action on the Remediation of Violence.
Okay, my name's Lois Lovejoy, thank you for that.
Like Mr. Cook, Township resident, first meeting.
Shauna Lilly, Ann Arbor resident.
Charlie Nielsen, Scio resident.
Colleen Lim, I'm from Wayne State University.
Welcome all. Again, if you haven't signed in yet, that's the sign-up sheet to try and track you all down. All right, so then the next item is approval of minutes from the December 3rd meeting.
This is just a board vote.
Second.
Motion, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, minutes are approved, thank you.
Okay, and then old business or follow-up items. So there's a couple from EGLE. So we're over to Dan Hamel.
The first one, the status of the trend analysis review. We're almost complete with our evaluation of the trend analysis. Like I said, we're not going to be utilizing anything we complete until we will be utilized to modify the sampling plans once the CJ is, the new modification is implemented through the CJ. I'm anticipating that we would have something here within the next couple of meetings to be able to present as far as our evaluation of the trend analysis. For those of you who don't know what that is, it is we had asked Gelman to complete a trend analysis on the results of monitoring wells. We asked them to do a selected number. It's not of all the monitoring, all 300 plus monitoring wells on utilized for the site. We wanted to see if the trend analysis could be utilized, like I said, to modify sampling plans once those are modified for our approval. So that's still ongoing. The status of the new compliance wells on Scioview development. For those of you that don't know, there was some compliance monitoring wells that were properly abandoned at the request of the Scioview development, the owner of the Scioview development area. The wells were located in a footprint of a proposed building, resident, I think. So we approved, they submitted the application to the Washington County, I believe, and then EGLE approved the proper abandonment of those wells right now. They were part of the current CJ, as at least a couple of them were compliance monitoring wells. One of them was, I believe. And what we have done is we plan on reinstalling compliance monitoring wells, but again, related to what we believe will be implementation of the new 7.2 criteria. The wells were utilized to evaluate compliance with the current CJ. And the current CJ, the criteria for 1,4-dioxane is 85. So we, rather than just moving a couple of feet and reinstalling wells that I believe will be not very useful, just wells to replace wells, we have told Gelman, at least right now, that we are going to utilize, those wells will be utilized as when we implement the 7.2 criteria as a compliance monitoring well. So we likely will move them as required to make sure they are in the proper location to monitor that 7.2 compliance in the groundwater. Yes.
So will that well be a different well, or will you try and?
No, those wells have been properly abandoned. Properly abandoned means that they have,
use them, okay.
yeah, they have been filled in with cement grout. The tops of them have been cut off down below certain depth.
That was 63.
The 63 cluster, yes. There was 3 of them. Shallow, intermediate, and deep. And all 3 of them were they were real close. They were within the area of this table here. All 3 of them were in a footprint of a proposed building for the development. So
you're going to replace
we'll replace all of them.
all, so there'll be 3 new wells?
There'll be 3 new wells at a location that is a better location for implementation of 7.2. Like I said, they were utilized we were sampled in reference to 85 as the current criteria in the current CJ, the approved current CJ right now. That we are in confidential negotiations, I know that's a bad word, here, in confidential negotiations with to modify and implement 7.2. Yes?
Are there any other wells that this is going on with, like in Ann Arbor, any other requests or? around
Not
development?
monitoring wells.
Okay.
No, not monitoring wells.
Thank you.
Unless Jenny has something in the real recent.
No, the county actually isn't notified ahead of time. They don't
For
apply for a
this-
permit for abandonment.
For abandonment, you're notified ahead of time requesting installation.
Correct. Yep.
Yes.
So given the fact that this is a glacial till, how likely are you to sample the same aquifer?
Well, what we
area?
anticipate doing when we implement the 7.2 at any location that any new location is we were going to vertically profile down to bedrock. As we have discussed and I believe kind of promised this group of some new wells with that implementation and do vertical profiling down to bedrock. So we will sample water-bearing zones down to bedrock, analyze those, and then take a look at to see what aquifer are these the water-bearing zones? Are they in the E aquifer? Where is contamination? And install the wells at those proper locations for the site-specific location that they're at.
So if it's 7.2, what do you hope to find dioxane at when you put in the compliance wells?
Well, we hope to find dioxane at nothing, at zero.
Okay,
So what the
what would
compliance?
be your trigger level then for
Well,
keeping a well there?
realize that how the current CJ is set up is the compliance monitoring wells that are identified in the CJ are wells that are sampled that are utilized to evaluate whether Gelman is in compliance with the CJ. What that means is currently the CJ is worded that these wells, 63, one of them was, I think the deep one was, are compliance monitoring wells, that they would be out of compliance if that well was sampled and had a concentration of dioxane greater than 85. That's how it's currently worded.
You said D, but it's all 3 are compliance wells.
I didn't look right before, Roger. I do not believe this.
I'm trying to propose.
They're not, I don't know off the top of my head, but they weren't or not all 3.
Yeah, I have it right here.
So it was,
Somewhere in here, there's a maps here, I can tell you which one. If you go online.
was 63, yes, a compliance well?
Just a second, Roger. if you go online, just what I'm looking at is the map of the latest 2015 map that is on our webpage. And on there, you'll see, I don't see, you can see, but you guys can, you'll see different colors. This is West Wagner, different colors. These are the compliance monitoring wells that are currently identified in the CJ. And so the 63 cluster, of course.
Are the compliance monitoring wells coded in the well database?
Item in the database, what do you mean?
No, there's a well database, it's the official list of information about
You know,
all the
I
wells.
don't know if it is or not in the.
Well, I can tell you it's not.
Okay. The monitoring wells, MW63, I and S are compliance monitoring wells. All MW63I, S and D were abandoned.
So I have a question. So who authorized drilling all the way to bedrock? If I'm not mistaken, Roger, we've been trying to get a well down to bedrock for quite a long time. If it ever existed, I don't know. So this would be a big change.
Well, they drove to bedrock with this
Way
cluster, but that was only because it was found at another well in the interior when they drilled down to bedrock. And then we insisted that they drill to bedrock as they found where this decontamination was. And that was one of the wells that was put in around that time.
The group of wells that went in the end of 14, MW 136 through 141, those are all, as far as I'm aware, vertically profiled and drilled down to
Yeah, but the drilling to bedrock happened much earlier than that.
Yeah, we started that back in the mid-2000s when wells were going in.
Well, it
We
was
asked-
back when the city's well was found to be contaminated.
Right, and so in some instances, we, Gelman did do what we requested, in other instances, we did not. That's way before my time as far as what was in the court and what kind of fights we did with them. It's in the record, in legal documents, you can go in and see back and forth nasty grams from us to Gelman and Gelman back. So, but that is what a compliance monitoring well is. And so what I'm talking about is, rather than going in and just doing at a location, just to do it, we want to do a logical location to implement a 7.2 as the number rather than 85. So that will likely mean that we're going to go to the east. We don't want to go out past out where the plume is, where there's a lot of distance, where there's nothing. We want to get closer so we can monitor and prevent concentrations greater than 7.2 from migrating, knowing that it's there, and so they have to do something.
What would be a trigger point for
The
catching the plume before it gets to 7.2?
Well, Roger, it will be the cluster of...
No, what would it be? What would it be, 4 parts per billion, 3 parts per billion?
No, well, I don't know what the final CJ is, but the CJ, the wording in the CJ, the legalese in the CJ, the trigger is 85, greater than 85.
Well, I'm harking back to when the cleanup standard was 3, and then these wells in Scio were contaminated at 2.
Right.
They got replacement water annexed to the city.
I don't know what the compliance monitoring well definition will be in the.
So for 7.2, it'd be around, I don't know, 4 maybe? And of course, we look at MW63S for 2018 data. There it is, 4 parts per billion. There's a well that was 4 parts per billion in 2018, and is now no longer a monitoring well, let alone even compliance. Is this a usable aquifer?
I believe so, the deeper, the E.
This is 40 to 50 feet deep.
I don't know.
Jenni, is that a usable aquifer? Anybody using water at 50 feet deep?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Neither.
Well, you should, because we have a hit on a well up at Greasewood that's 50 feet deep.
Right, that's,
So it must be a usable aquifer.
well, that's quite a distance, right?
You can't, it's
I'm
not.
just saying, depth-wise, 50 feet is not
We
unusual.
can't put that to say.
For a supply well.
But we have monitored the homes along Liberty.
No, but here's a well that is, I thought the whole cluster was a compliance monitoring well, but I guess not. It's maybe a deeper one that's,
Two of them are, I
Two of them, but not.
Intermediate and shallow.
Oh, and shallow. So here's a shallow well that was already for price pavilion that you
Current
knew was going to
standard
be
is-
regulated at 7.2 at some point, and yet you allowed the company to shut down this well without having a replacement nearby.
And the number that it was evaluated against. is
Yeah, I
85.
know, but
The wells will be replaced. and
Somewhere
hopefully
east of
located in a
this.
more-
Well, we will look at locations to.
So we're talking about this location here. And here's a nearby well that's also shallow on the same property. And here are well, that's D, isn't it? I don't want D, I want shallow. Zoom in on I can't read the screen from here. So here's what dioxane levels are heading that way according to Gelman's own plume map.
Sharpen the focus a little bit on the projection. Well, here, I'll do it.
What do you need?
I think we can focus it better.
Yeah,
It's on the
I think
Oh,
it's
this-
somewhat on.
There's a- I think there's a bar on the top.
There, you just did it,
Yeah, it's
that's
better.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That's big in my eyes.
And here I didn't even.
You thought it was you.
Got my glasses?
So anyway, here, this one's not about to be shut down, though, right?
I've been asked for that.
I mean, because that's kind of important, that we know that there's double and triple digits.
Wow.
Dioxane apparently heading in that direction.
What number is that, Roger?
That is 56, yes.
Yeah. I wish the numbers.
That is not a current compliance norm.
No, because it's already triple digits, why would you be a compliance level?
The court, like I said, back when, one of the modifications, the court.
Yeah, we know what the court does, but who advises the court?
Roger, we argued against it. Go back to the record. You'll see that DEQ argued, didn't like that, didn't like where the compliance monitoring wells were. We thought they were too far out and there was too much distance.
And
in
Gelman
that.
argued that.
Gelman argued the
against it.
opposite case, and the judge at that time agreed with Gelman.
So
he said that.
the Gelman won that argument,
Yes.
as they've done several times before.
Right.
Just want to make that clear to everybody. Under the current CJ and powers that be and resources we have available to the local community, Gelman wins.
Has in the past, but again, there's a whole new order of things going on right now, we're in the new judge. But the rest of the.
We're still under the
for
CJ.
now, to keep on track.
Right.
And move to Commissioner Morgan's update.
But we're not supposed to be having discussion about this until you get through your update.
You know that, don't you?
I knew that. I wasn't going to say anything. I'll answer anybody's questions at any time. I mean, just.
So we'll cover when you're going to have the new compliance wells in place in the discussion portion.
Oh, I see.
That's all the old business that is listed that I had too, currently.
So
I
update
don't know
on
what
the joint
B
working
and
session.
C are, okay. The joint working session, what'd you say?
The joint working session that's happening a
So,
week from Thursday.
That's me. Hi, I'm Jason Morgan, Chair of
Jason.
the Washington County Board of Commissioners, and Commissioner Majeski's here, and I know Katie from the Legal's office. I had just emailed Beth and mentioned that I could step by, and Jason and Katie can add to that, but I just wanted to make sure you all had a thorough heads up that there's a meeting. It's technically Congresswoman Dingell's meeting on January 16th, but following our last meeting, our last joint meeting with Washington County, City of Ann Arbor, Scio Township, and that whole conversation, the next step in that was a meeting with the EPA and with EGLE and Congresswoman Dingell bringing them in, and that is on January 16th.
Is that closed or
Open. So it's a fully open, fully
6:30 at
transparent.
the same place you had the
6:30?
last.
Yep, at the Washington County Learning Resource Center. I'm 99.9% sure the time is 6:30 p.m.
It is.
Yes, so there it is, 6:30 p.m. And so we'll send, you already have the information, but we'll send another confirmation sometime tomorrow as well. That's fully open, there's no closed session. It is technically Congresswoman Dingell's meeting, so we don't have to have the same,
Format.
so same format and voting and all that stuff. We as elected officials will be there as guests of Congresswoman Dingell. Jack and Kathy will chat. We'll have to follow up and chat just to make sure that what we'll do at the county is publish a thing saying that we expect a quorum of our board to be present, but it's not like we're voting, we're not formally.
Okay, so it's not a working session?
No, so it's not a working session. This one will be a meeting with, so I probably more accurate phrasing of it would be a meeting with Congresswoman Dingell and the EPA and EGLE.
Question and answer session?
So I need to talk to Debbie, I don't know, Katie, if she's clarified yet what format she wants on that. We'll clarify that tomorrow and send that out to everyone.
We're working on clarifying. It has been an exciting few weeks in our office, and not to say the very least. And so we're it's just been fun to be in our office.
Extenuating circumstances.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't watched the news lately or anything. And so we are, at this point, just basically trying to figure out what format we want this to be in. But we do obviously want to make sure that it's entirely open, informational, question and answer. We want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to get their questions answered. We want to make sure we have EPA officials there so that everyone from elected officials to the public to attorneys have the opportunity to get clarity on exactly what points, any points of points that need clarity, points that need to be spelled out more clearly.
So generally speaking, the public will get a chance to ask questions?
That is my understanding.
I believe so.
Yeah.
So we've been talking with Debbie about.
This is on tape.
Oh, yeah. That's right. So we've been talking to Debbie about exactly what the format's going to be, but.
Whether that's, and I don't mean to get off, whether that's elected first and then the public, or.
I'm not saying I'm holding it to it, but I think it would be great if you had a question and answer, and that's how it was presented originally. So hopefully that's how it'll.
So very candidly, we've had a lot of people ask questions about what EPA would and wouldn't do. We've had lawyers tell us what they would and wouldn't do, and we don't care what the lawyers are going to say about what they would and wouldn't do. We want the EPA directly in here telling us what they will or will not do, and to give us as definitive of answers as they can. And Congresswoman Dingell has made extremely clear to the EPA and to us that she will help us get those answers. So we've sent some questions that the attorneys have asked us in these sessions that I said, what are we allowed to actually ask them in public? And they've given us a couple of questions to ask them. And then there'll be the chance for all of us to ask questions to the EPA as well.
Vince, you could submit written questions if you wanted to me, and I would try to get those into that process so that.
Can anybody send any questions?
So, yes, they can send them to me because there is a process to get them to the EPA.
Can I CC Jack?
Pardon me?
Can I CC Jack?
I don't know, can you?
And this isn't to say that we're not going to have questions open to the public. It just is to say that, like, we've been back from, in our office, we've been back from break for 4 days at this point, and it is.
Never a dull moment.
Yeah, like, I got through my voicemails yesterday because we had so many for the last couple of days, so I was just.
Yeah, great. So I do have a concern, though. What I really, what Jason just described has been, my impression is that there's a lot of back and forth about, this is what the EPA can or can't do or will or won't do or said or didn't say or whatever. And so here's my concern is I would like, I just don't know how, I wonder if there's anything we can do to ensure that the questions get asked that are being obstacles in the various elected bodies. So in the Scio Township discussions, in the Washington County Board of Commission discussions, in the City Council discussions, what are the negative questions? What are the obstacles that you hear when you're talking to your fellow elected officials who say, oh, we, this or this or this, and how do we make sure that those questions get asked?
So I know that I personally have been keeping a running list of things that I've heard be points of contention in the past, or points where one group of people has, points of confusion, points of contention, where there's been sort of a disagreement in what the right path, not the right path, I don't want to use the wrong words here, but what the more likely path forward would be, or what one group is capable of doing or the other. And although I don't know yet what the format is going to be, my hope is to hear straight from the EPA's mouth, straight from the horse's mouth, what they're capable of doing. And if we can have those questions, anyone who'd like to send questions to me, my goal is to have some of those questions to EPA ahead of time and give them the opportunity to know, this is what we're going to anticipate you needing to answer, and we'd like to have you prepared to answer these questions. So anyone who has questions they'd like to get to me ahead of time, you're more than welcome to. We can have that list ready to go. Maybe we can even get some of those questions written out ahead of time, questions and answers written out ahead of time.
The big
Remind us
question
of
is
your
going to be,
email.
Yeah.
the big question is going to be, can EPA do anything? And there's been a lot of talk, and this is like a real game changer, that EPA is totally, dysfunctional, can't do anything, won't do anything. I've learned from Debbie Stabenow that's not actually the case, that when there's a responsible party like what we have here in Ann Arbor with this Gelman plume, actually EPA is working pretty hard on those sites and is getting the money from the responsible parties. It's where you don't have a responsible party is that people are confused because EPA has no money anymore unless they find the responsible party to clean up the site. And they do other sites, but they're not as fast, and they're sometimes take a long time to get to them. This is not one of those cases. So I want to make sure that that information is requested of EPA and make sure that that's cleared up, because I think that is a real sticking point for a lot of people who don't want EPA involved for whatever reason. They're afraid of the stigma for their city council or whatever. And I think we need to make sure that that's cleared up.
So if I may, I'm going to ask you to trust our congresswoman. She has insisted that we have this meeting for those very reasons. And however it turns out that she runs the meeting, her primary interest is to have those questions answered to all of our satisfaction. And so the fact that she has worked so hard to arrange this meeting really makes it such that she deserves our trust, that she's going to
Well, maybe she wants our help.
Listen, I'm not going to say no to help.
I don't think we're acting distrustful.
No,
I think we're just trying to.
But,
You guys
I
are
mean,
great.
fundamentally, the questions that we have, and so, forward your questions to her office or to your council member or your
Once again,
county commissioner.
once again,
Yes.
submit those questions, because we've been doing it for
But
decades and
the
decades.
very purpose of the reason is all of the things that concern everybody at this table. And so, just having the meeting should in fact engender a level of trust that
Of course.
the purpose will be fulfilled.
So I don't think anyone replies otherwise.
And I'm happy to hand out my email. I also know every elected official in the room has my email, so I'm going to give it to you. In the interest of being forward, the federal government gives us crazy emails. So if you have a pen, get it ready. It's Katie, Katie, .Jositis, JES like Sam, AIT like Tom, IS like Sam, at mail.house.gov.
So it's on the website too?
It's not.
It's not.
Well, so maybe what we could do is we can send, we're gonna.
Yeah, if you have someone else's
format the
email.
details, and we can send that out, so we'll coordinate. So
Yeah.
the county is hosting the space. Debbie, Katie has been doing phenomenal in terms of trying to keep us
They're
connected
excited.
and organized, but Debbie has also been doing a lot of these conversations directly for herself. And so pulling all of these pieces together has been a challenge. I think it's a great idea to send questions to Katie so she can help pull those together and really highlight the biggest questions and maybe prioritize a bit. I asked the lawyers that have been working with us as the electeds for questions that they, basically the sticking points that they've had around the EPA, and they've given us, they gave me 4 questions that I sent directly to Debbie, and I'll make sure you have them, Katie.
Yeah.
That they had noted. Because I think, Vince, to what you're getting at is frustration that, yeah, we had the EPA a year ago. We heard a lot of things, and I agree with you. I heard a lot of things that they would and wouldn't do, and we've sometimes heard conflicting things from those that work for us as the electeds, working on the lawsuit. Yes, as the attorneys. And so this has been the culmination of basically, I think, us feeling like we're getting closer to a decision point, and being frustrated with people contradicting what we heard out of the mouth of the EPA a year ago. And so we want the EPA to come in again to be very clear with us, and Debbie wanted that to be public and open, and the purpose of having it be her meeting really is so that we don't have to jump through all the hoops that we do as elected officials when we call meetings, is that it can be just completely transparent, open, and if it's Debbie's meeting, she can say whatever the heck she wants, and be fully in charge of it. She doesn't have to deal with us having, to choose who gets to speak and whatnot. I don't think we're gonna have it set up where like we as the elected sit around in front like we usually do, because I don't think that's the purpose of this meeting, is for us to be up there talking. I think it's really for people to hear directly from the EPA and for the EPA to communicate directly with us. I think that's the goal. So I've heard some frustration events, and I just want you to know that's kind of where this comes from, is a shared frustration by some of us on the elected side. And I think the fact that we're getting closer to a decision point, we want to make sure that as we've had all those closed session meetings, and we hear all the perspective in there, we're also getting a one last update from the EPA and one last chance to make sure we're asking all of our questions in a public setting to get all that done, and then hopefully get closer to a decision point after that.
Will EGLE have a representative there? Because some of the questions are, how does EGLE and the interface?
I think Debbie has spoken directly with Lisa Clark.
I believe,
I thought
my
so.
understanding, again, I'm kind of way down from Lisa Clark, is that she was invited by Debbie and has accepted, or at least right tentatively related to that. So you will also have other tech, I will be there, our Jackson District Office will be there, I believe, our new RRD director will be there, but I at least was invited and I believe that's accepted. We gotta confirm that, but that's my understanding.
Will all the electeds be there to listen here and before they vote? I mean,
I believe so. I mean, I think we
I'm gonna count.
discussed it at our last meeting. So we're gonna we'll send a follow-up email to everybody tomorrow just to share all the details and confirm it and encourage everybody to come. But I don't know, like Jason and, Kathy, if you guys think, I think it's clear.
I will be there.
It was clear on our board that we should be there, right? Like,
Yes.
so.
I can't imagine anyone's gonna pick this meeting.
Okay, I hope
Yeah.
so.
We just
need important vote
Yeah.
decisions.
I can't imagine anyone's gonna pick this one to skip that.
Exactly.
I
Please ask the lawyers.
I actually moved forward to address this because this would be an opportunity, I'm looking forward to this opportunity, because I'm going to ask the questions that aren't filtered through our lawyers, that aren't on the lawyers' matrices. Because some of the questions that are on there, frankly, are questions that we know the answers to, but no one's asking but them. And it's about managing expectations of the cleanup. Is one of them in my mind. Like, I know there's been a lot of talk of throwing around this idea, well, if the EPA can't clean up to drinking water standards all aquifers, well, nobody has that expectation. That's unrealistic. And that's not a reason to overlook the EPA's intervention,
I would say I amended their questions to be better.
I mean, just as an example of the questions that are bouncing around out there, and it's like, we don't need to answer, we know the answer, they're not going to. Nobody can. That's been established, right? So, things like that. It's a lawyer-free opportunity as far as I'm concerned. I know they're going to be there, but.
They're going to be
No
there more
lawyers
as
allowed?
observers.
I challenge you to keep a lawyer quiet in the meeting.
Well, that's fine, but,
And will it be videotaped?
Tape.
Roger will be there.
So,
I know
actually, no, that's a
voices.
great question. We don't have the setup to videotape it in there, but if you guys want to videotape
Well,
it.
CTN wasn't scheduled, but then suddenly they were there.
Right, so
Last
if
time, and I
anybody
plan on
has
being
any
there in case
intentions to
they're not there
videotape
again.
it, please do. I don't think we
Is there?
had,
Not there this time.
I don't think we're aware that CTN is able to record it. So if you guys have any way to record it.
They recorded because it was a city working session.
Right.
Right.
We can make
Outside
that
the normal
request.
schedule.
I guess, Rob,
I'm on the cable commission, I can ask.
Well, I mean, I tried to make
It's
it
good to have,
clear.
it's good to have backup.
I tried to make it clear that it was not a county or city meeting, because then I think we,
You have to get into like
procedural stuff and the formal
Forums.
forum and voting and all that stuff, so that's why it's Debbie's meeting.
Somebody just mentioned something that I want to clear up.
And
It was about whether they would clean up the drinking water standards. This is from the last meeting with the EPA. 7.2 parts per billion would apply throughout the plume.
That's pretty clean.
Yeah,
compared to what it is right now.
Wherever that other side is.
Straight from the horse's mouth.
Listen, I've heard the same answers, and somehow others don't hear the same things.
Well, this is the video link.
Well, I 7.2 versus this notion that there's some kind of pristine restoration going on. That's what's been fronted a little bit. Obviously, it's not.
what's going on over there? You keep raising
Oh,
your
I
hand.
just had a question. Have they planned another closed session yet to make progress on this, or are they not?
We have not planned another closed session on it
We've
yet.
asked about it.
I think our thought was that we wanted to see how this conversation goes with the EPA. I think that was, I don't know if you
Well,
guys-
there's this, and then there's also the discussions between the interveners and the polluter. And so, getting back into a closed session too soon might not be a good use of our time, you know, if we're not
Just gotta
ready,
keep it-
if we're not ready to start deciding things.
Yeah. But I wanted to come and make sure you all had the opportunity to ask all these questions and get it out there and understand what the meeting on the 16th is and have clear expectations. But our goal really is to have this be the last darn time we have to have the EPA come in and repeat the same things. And to make sure that we're thoroughly asking all of our questions of them, and it's in public, so we can hear all of that. But I think, to Jeff's point, I think we do want to make sure we understand clear expectations of what EPA would mean, and having realistic expectations of what would and what they do, or what would and what would they not do, as we're going through this decision-making process. But I think there's a lot of value in hearing from them.
Along what Marcia was asking though, then what's the next step? Like, you've got these consent things that we aren't privy to. When do we, the public, get to see what Gelman's offering you? Our elected officials, then.
Well, you only get to see what they're offering us if we get to a point where we would have a final, basically a final take it or leave it offer.
So if it's about to come to us to vote on approving something, yes or no, we would first release it to the
Yeah.
public and allow the public to review it for a reasonable period of time. Some of us will be pushing to have like a public meeting so you can come and yell at us about what you found.
So there'll be ample time before you, and then it goes to Judge Connors, and I don't.
No.
Oh, okay, I'm confused, I guess.
A consent agreement isn't really controlled by the judge.
Yeah, it's more like a mediator, right?
He's not in the room. This is just negotiations, and if we get a final product that everybody's willing to sign on to, then it goes to the judge after we all agree to accept it, you know, both parties, both sides. And he would only review it to make sure that it's not unlawful.
Okay.
Dan, that's all parties.
Yeah.
All parties.
Right, so that's the challenge, is all parties would need
It's
to.
a mutually agreeable document, that's what the confidential negotiations.
All council
is.
members,
It's
all
mutually
trustees.
agreeable to all the parties that are involved. If that is not done, then the judge, then it goes to the court. And that's when it goes to court and the judge, Connor, oversees that directly.
Is it a unanimous or is it a majority?
No, it is a mutual, well,
Majority in each of our boards.
well,
That's what I mean.
Okay.
okay, if you meant the parties,
Right.
it has to be unanimous,
All
and
the
mutually
parties.
agreeable. Basically, everybody's agreeing, well, we're gonna sign this thing.
Yeah.
How it's negotiated.
But if we don't get to a point where we have something that's close enough to that, if we decide we were just walking away, for example, then you would never see what we've been talking about for all these 9 months.
And then that would move, then it would go into court, and whatever the court process is, historically, it's been, where you whatever, and you go to court and you present your arguments, each of the groups.
Well, what we do know is that it's going to be something less than what the EPA can do, because otherwise. the
But we don't
company-
know that until after the 16th.
No, we know that because otherwise the company would be wanting the EPA to come.
I would reject, I don't think we know that. I don't think we know that.
I think that that's not a bad assumption, you know, that we do have their attention at this moment because we keep using those three letters in that order. But, so there are actually two ways this could break down. The other way is that we could say we must have these items, and the company says no way, and they walk away. So either way, on either side of the negotiations, one party or the other can just say, well, heck no. And if it's us, one of the possibilities is to try to litigate it in state court or go to the EPA. So no, it's simple.
Thank you.
Including reading through all of this stuff and trying to figure out what has changed. So.
But what I've heard from all the electeds in our conversations is that we want to get to a point where we can share something with everyone publicly, whether we accept it or not, I don't know, but we want to be able to get to a point where we can share something publicly, and then we make a decision on what we do, whether we accept something or whether we scrap that and go with EPA and try that route. But we want to know from the EPA is what that route would look like and have one final conversation about it. And huge credit to Debbie, getting them back after they basically said we're not coming back is no small task. She has been tireless on this. So I think Jack's point about trusting Debbie, Debbie is, I think, shares our value. I think certainly all of your values here, and I certainly share your values too, in terms of getting that information out, having that conversation, and then it'll be up to us as the electeds to figure out what we do after that. And I don't know what we'll do yet.
Could you sorry. In terms of next steps, we had a resolution on the agenda for last night's city council meeting to petition the EPA. And that was postponed until our next meeting on Tuesday the 21st. And I plan to continue to do that to keep it front and center. So it's not going to go away.
We might be voting on it.
That's true.
It's on the agenda.
You know, if this consent judgment falls apart at any point, and we had the meeting on the 16th, and so we know the facts from that, we'll be ready to act. So it's not like it's going to take another 90 days for us to get it on the agenda.
So I just have a quick follow-up, Jason. You said something that after the EPA said basically said they were never coming back. I guess I hadn't heard that before. Could you just very, very briefly?
Not never. They said they sort of hit a point where they couldn't do more on this unless we actually asked for EPA supervision.
They were engaged with us for 1 year as part of their agreement with us, and we were doing quarterly meetings where we had every single stakeholder in the room, and they came to 4 of our quarterly meetings, and at that point they were here, they were advising and giving guidance, and at that point they just said, we've been moving as a communal, but we're going to need to step back until we're ready to move forward, continue to move forward as a group. Was it last May, I think?
We were here in this room.
Yeah, the big quarterly meetings, and that included, this group, but also all the different governments, the state reps, our office, DEQ.
It was in May 2019.
Okay. Yeah.
So one sentence, the bottom line was the EPA's reason was?
They want us to decide together as a community what we want.
Okay.
And that requires, so my biggest fear in all of this is that some entities, the 4 of us as communities, Scio, Washington County, City of Ann Arbor, well, I guess here we're Washington Council, but I guess really mainly the 3 of us, if we don't all move in the same direction, I worry that we won't get anything done.
That's always been the case.
Right. So my personal biggest goal in all this is figuring out a route that we can all move forward with together. Because if we don't find a route that we move forward with together, I don't know what that looks like. I think it gets messy, and I don't know what that looks like. So we may end up in a situation where we're not all completely satisfied with one route or the other, but we have to make a choice. I think, which is why I've been trying to have these meetings with everybody together, with city, township, and the county, all of us elected officials in one room, rather than separate conversations at each of our boards. Because it's all of us as a collective that really need to work together on this and figure something out, not just acting individually and doing whatever we want. Because we all just do whatever we want, and it doesn't result in something that has us all moving together, I'm really worried that we will get nothing, and we'll just keep doing the same thing we've been doing for all these years.
40 years.
The agreement
I worry
has to
about
be for
these.
the letter to send to the governor, right?
Yeah.
That's the
I worry about the secrecy
And
of
I
the
think-
negotiations, because I've seen what happens when there are secret negotiations, and it's almost always not been beneficial to the public.
Mhm.
Even the contested case was quote secret, but fortunately, we were allowed to intervene.
Right.
And we won the major part of that contested case because there was citizen involvement. In fact, one of the Scio Township citizens was our expert witness. And he blew away the expert witness that the company did.
Yeah.
We have those resources here in this community, and they're not in the current secret negotiations. And that could be bad news. Because when you say everybody needs to get together, everybody's not together because the public, people that know more about it like me, are not part of the negotiations. You have outside expert witnesses come in who are not part of the community. You have lawyers who have conflicts of interest. And that's not a very good face to put to the public.
And some of us recognize that, and that's why we are so optimistic about the 16th.
Good. I'm optimistic too. I'm going to send, I compiled these quotes from the last EPA meeting from Burkhoff, and I will send this out to everybody.
Oh, great. Yeah, that would be good.
These are segments, beginning segments of the YouTube
Thank you
video
for
that I
that.
took.
I'd just like to say that Rita and I, a couple of years ago, submitted a petition to ATSDR to investigate exposures in this area. They evaluated it. They were concerned. They said they were going to put it on the back burner for now. So that's another avenue we could use. Rita learned about that at a meeting, at an EPA meeting. We could submit another ATSDR petition. I'm not sure that that would work, but that's another avenue we could go, and that anybody can submit that. And then they investigate with toxicologists, biologists, health professionals, and geologists, and come in and make a determination whether you're being exposed at dangerous levels, and then they propose actions that need to be taken.
Do they evaluate whether you could be in the future exposed to dangerous levels?
No.
I don't
No,
know
of
if
course
it's still
not.
on their radar.
Because that's what,
More the health.
we're trying to prevent future exposures. If they come in and find out that there's no current exposure, then the company can say, let's see, we don't have to clean it up.
No, well, that's not what they do.
Well, it's an emergency.
So be careful.
It's an
That's not
emergency,
big.
no, they're more of an emergency.
But I think it would help a petition if we had actually some data.
I think.
Data is important.
It doesn't have to be scientific data. It could even just be, cases. If we would, but we haven't really collected those.
Well, the anecdotal exposure data didn't work for the Westover people.
So I don't want to.
They lost
I
those
think,
cases.
I think
Well,
I'm thinking
it's
what you're
court
trying here,
case.
but.
Those were court cases.
No, but ATSDR is not court case. That's
So-
not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just the petition is more likely to be successful to get the ATSDR involved if you actually can, put some meat on it.
As long as it doesn't muddle up the cleanup.
Well, we don't have it anyway.
Yeah, there's no
cleanup.
Well, there's cleanup, but it's just.
No, that's not what I'm
to the
saying. We
degree
don't have
want.
the, I don't know, we don't have the cases that I know of.
Okay.
So I gotta run shortly anyway, but I just want to make sure you guys had all the information, had a thorough understanding of what we're doing the 16th, sort of had an update of where we're at with things. And Roger, we all agree with you. We would love for this not to be confidential. It is frustrating, and I know every one of us as electeds in there is as frustrated as you are. I don't know of a better way, because we don't really have
Well,
a lot of options.
I could submit a proposal to charge you $400 an hour to come consult.
I mean, hey, maybe, if this goes on any longer, let's consider it, but no, I think that meeting on the 16th hopefully will be a public chance to really understand finally the last sort of chance on this EPA super fun, and I hope that we will, as electeds, get closer very soon to some sort of decision. Well, I think Jack started saying is we really want to have something that people can actually see after all these months, so that you can see it and see what we're looking at before we make a decision. Because then we need to make a decision whether we take it or leave it. But as to Jack's point earlier, we've been pretty direct in what we want, and so we may hit a point where they say no, and we don't get something to be able to share. That would be unfortunate, but I don't know.
Can you vote to release the information even if they don't agree to it? You can't have a majority vote on it?
It's under court work.
Yeah.
I thought the court would at all.
Court, the confidentiality agreement is under the court.
So with that, I took a lot more of your agenda than I planned on, but
It was
thank
we
you all
loved every
for
minute of it,
being
Jason.
part of
It
this.
was good, thank you.
And my email's up there now. Today was a bad day to not bring 1,000 business cards. But if you don't send it straight to me, send it to any of the elected officials. They all have my email address too.
Anybody that's gotten the emails from the card court, I sent it to the card court group, anybody that's been at one of these meetings, in other words, she is CC'd on that.
Who is?
I am.
So you
Oh,
got
yeah.
the copy.
Well, not everyone's in card course, maybe Beth can send.
Anybody
when you
that's
get the
come to a
updates from
meeting
me,
should
you
be
want
in
the
card
meeting.
court.
Like,
Yeah,
updates tomorrow.
I don't know if everybody has my email, but you can, you all know Jack and Kathy and Jason, but email us too if you want anything, if you have any questions.
I'm sorry, that's bad form, pushing your email off into my inbox.
Email Jack. Yeah, I'll send my email. Thanks.
But thanks anyway.
Before you leave, did everybody read my data email?
I did not read
All
all
the
of it.
elected officials, did you read that?
I really appreciated the one that compares the UV oxidation to the ozone.
Yeah, that was the prior one.
I love that one.
Yeah, and the data one continued along to the same theme, saying here's what the data legacy has been for this site, and what's wrong with it and why it's causing problems for the cleanup. And if you go to the EPA route, that problem gets solved. You won't have this recalcitrant
Okay,
data
so
sharing.
January 16th, 6:30 PM at the Learning Resource Center for more information from EPA. And then I want to get back on agenda, so I'm very sorry. Now we're going to the EGLE updates from the end. The current updates, not new items.
First item is the 2020 residential well sampling. Basically, we have come to an agreement and have identified to Washtenaw County the wells for 2020. If you remember, we had a discussion, Jenny and I sit down and go through each year what wells we are going to sample. She came up with a proposal over this last year of, rather than arbitrarily having just opinions, our opinions, we're going to relate the sampling of residential wells and water supply wells, homes and businesses, utilizing a 1,000-foot buffer zone from the known contamination. Any new wells that are contaminated, so the 1,000-foot will go from there. So we have it's not an arbitrary decision of this address gets sampled and this address doesn't. If an address falls within a 1,000-foot buffer of known contamination, then we will sample it. Next year, we are sampling, I had initially identified 191 wells. We've identified 3 additional wells related to that 1,000-foot buffer. Jenny did, and we approved that. He will approve that. So we'll sample 194 wells next year. Some of those are sampled twice a year. So the total number of samples are going to be approximately 221. Now, that is what is proposed. What actually happens when Washtenaw County goes out in the field, I mean, it's usually less than that because people aren't home, do not identify that they want their wells sampled and that type of thing. But that is what has been proposed and what EGLE has authorized Washtenaw County to do. That sampling, as it does every year, will start most likely between March and April, and it'll be completed sometime. It'll be completed by October 1st. but they'll have, like I said, some of the locations will be sampled twice a year.
Who
The
pays for
majority will
that?
be completed by July
Who
1st.
pays for that? That is paid for by EGLE under a program called long-term monitoring.
Okay, so
It's not just
taxpayers.
It's not just Gelman that we do this all over the state at sites. It's a long-term monitoring program, so Gelman, you know, we.
Are there any sites where the polluter pays for that?
Not under that program.
No, of any of the sites that you administer that are, where the
Well, I will
polluter
tell
pays
you,
for the monitoring?
Gelman samples selected wells as part of the
No,
monitoring.
no, I'm just talking about the peripheral wells.
I don't have that knowledge, firsthand knowledge, Roger. I'm not gonna.
You don't know if there's any DEQ sites that actually
I don't
make the
have
polluter
that.
pay to do the sampling around the peripheral?
I don't want to say yes or no, I don't know.
Okay,
So,
good enough.
So,
You don't know.
A quick question, you said residents within 1,000-foot diameter of known contamination. How do you define contamination?
Positive detection.
Any
Above-
detection?
Any detection.
Okay.
Not above criteria, not above a number, any detection. For example, I think Roger popped up there a second ago, the Breezewood Court
That's where
detection.
it's centered on right
That was 1 ppb. So that new 1,000-foot buffer went out 1,000 foot. The ones that Jenny found, I didn't catch them either, were along Elizabeth. We had a new detection on the north side of Elizabeth. And so that 1,000-foot buffer was moved a little bit to the north, and so we incorporated 3 more wells out that way related to that. And again, these are sampled as part of that long-term monitoring. So if someone calls us and says, hey, I'd like my well sampled, we were arbitrarily saying yes or no, and we didn't like that. EGLE didn't, Jenny didn't have like that conversation. So this 1,000-foot buffer was a kind of established based upon best professional judgments from scientists, and is a number that we can utilize and say, you know, you're outside that 1,000 foot, we don't think you are having a problem.
So Dan, which of these township properties that show here the white diamonds are the 3 new ones that weren't?
On the north side of Dexter and Arbor to the west.
Yeah, there's like 8 of them here, so.
They're all being sampled. We've added 3 to the list of.
Yeah,
they're all being
199.
sampled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there might be some up here near,
Sampling them too.
Those might be the 3 new ones.
this might be on Cherrywood, I
Well,
don't
there's
know.
three. All those wells.
Yeah, they're all actually,
Right, right.
Within
none of them are
Greenwich.
Cherrywood addresses. They're North Wagner Road addresses.
So when you look at this one Park Pavilion line that goes around, how often is that getting updated?
Well, it's
Current.
monitoring wells are sampled under the approved monitoring plans. We sample we sample yearly for residential wells. Like I said, if you remember some years ago when I first started, we would only sample about 40 wells, residential wells. So it has expanded.
Does the county update this map?
Yep,
Yep.
it was updated last year, it's been updated again at the end of this year, but it hasn't been published yet because I haven't gotten approvals to do that yet. But the new,
So on average, it's every 6
So
months?
the new,
or-
yeah.
pretty much as we get new detections, I mean, so my latest one incorporates the new detection on the north side of Elizabeth as well as Breezewood Court. I just haven't gotten approvals.
And just realize that yellow area, it's an estimated area.
Yeah.
Right.
If you don't have, where you don't have actual wells, I mean, it's estimated in between.
Right.
And that is a professional judgment related to people familiar with the groundwater.
And if anyone's looking at the county map, it will show some drinking water wells within the plume area on the west side. We monitor those wells, they've been non-detect. So just because they're shown there, they're at a depth, they're drinking from an aquifer that's not affected. But again, our plume blob is not the best way to go about representing a
Right,
plume.
that's
It's
a
the best we have
horizontal
available.
view. If
It's
you
a 2D
understand,
version of a 3D product.
Roger said it's very complicated geology. There's zones of water-bearing zones. And so that it's kind of artificial of that whole area. That whole area isn't contaminated because certain zones that aren't, there's no water in it, it's clay or whatever. So but this is the best way to kind of estimate and have a quick visual presentation for people to understand.
So if you find contamination, at what level do you swap out well water for city water?
7.2 parts,
7.2
greater than
now?
7.2 parts per billion. Well, not city water, with
Bottled water.
bottled water until a permanent safe source of drinking water can be extended to that property, so.
Now, whether that 7.2 is under the criteria, so that is under the law. But I'm sure that EGLE would be asking.
If it's a
Gelman,
5 or 3.
If there was a detection that we felt, hey, they're not at 7.2, but
They're going
there's
that
a
way.
trend,
Yeah.
we would want to make sure that people were drinking safe water.
The
And
highest we've seen in the last few years.
whether
is
that
2
would
parts per
mean,
billion.
I know EGLE would immediately get bottled water to people and also then pursue the responsible party, Gelman, to do that as an interim. But, but the 7.2 is the actual criteria, so
Well, people can't stay on bottled water forever.
absolutely.
No, it just municipal water can't be extended overnight. I mean, there's a few properties where municipal water is available along Jackson and South Wagner, but if you go up towards like Elizabeth or somewhere, or Reedswood Court, municipal water is not available. So we can't say they provide us bottled water until the municipal water.
So if they get water from the city, do they have to get sewer?
Not necessarily, not if they're in the township.
Oh.
So that's a new.
Only if they're the properties, basically if they were
They have to pay.
those commercial properties on South Wagner, just north of Liberty.
So do they just pay for water then to the city?
Yeah, yeah. As long as they're not a township
No
island.
property tax?
So are they
They would have to get-
drinking 2 parts per billion? These people are okay with that? Like, I wouldn't want to drink
They
any
have
parts
that
per
in their
billion.
wells, whether or not they're drinking it or drinking
No,
bottled water.
Elizabeth, potentially.
Unknown to us.
They probably drinking bottled water.
Yes, sir.
They're notified every year.
Probably cooking and showering.
With our samples.
So this is my first time here. Can you just, maybe there are first timers, can you help us with the color coding, number one? What the color is. Number two is what is Huron River relative on this map? Can you point to us? Just help us understand. This is my first time, so I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
but I just want to understand.
Yeah. So we're representing the Huron River, showing up here.
Okay.
The
You can-
yellow is the estimated 1 part per billion plume boundary, which is the current detection limit that.
The yellow plume.
For the monitoring wells that Gelman is monitoring and the state samples. So 1 part per billion is the lowest they can detect down to. And then the darker red plumes are the 85 parts per billion, which used to be the state cleanup criteria for dioxane, but is what the consent judgment still uses currently.
That's one of the big problems. The consent judgment still uses 85.
So according to this map, if I understand correctly, then we're already in the river, right? Those red things are already getting.
No.
to the-
Oh, no, the red outline is called the prohibition zone, and it's the area that is serviced by city water, where you can't put in a
Prohibition
well.
zone is
Okay.
mentioned in the consent judgment. It is an institutional control that drinking water wells are not allowed within that boundary of that red zone. So, you know,
Yeah.
no wells,
So
so.
if I understand that, yeah, I'm not a technical guy, I'm an engineer, but not a water engineer. I wanted to know if that is the boundary that is restricted for well water, and no, can you zoom the other panel the other way towards the river? Okay. So all that is no zone for well, which means within the boundary of the Huron River is actually, you cannot drink well water, which means this thing is getting into the river.
Oh, yeah.
It's heading that way.
No one downstream is using water
We are
from the
drinking
river.
from the river, isn't it? We're eventually,
Our water comes from Barton Pond, 85% of it.
okay.
up here.
That's upstream.
We're worried about
Yes.
this portion here making its way north either through this channel or this channel or this channel
Right.
eventually, or even this channel or this channel.
Sure. There's water all over.
Because
the
this is Honey Creek and it serves pretty much all of it.
Yes, and I live right by Handy Creek actually.
Where's your address?
I'm on Park and Z area.
That's where Roger's on.
You're over here, you're up to the west. Right?
There's a creek actually runs by me, which is tiny creek also part of it. It feeds into it actually.
Are you in the southern boundary here?
Yeah, Arbor Point subdivision.
Arbor Point, okay.
Okay, thank you for
No,
answering
yeah,
the
thank you for
question.
asking the questions, and then we'll be here afterwards too if you have additional
Okay,
questions
thank
and
you.
on our contact.
Thank you.
One of those questions being asked, I'm looking at the agenda, the Scioview development, just to clarify just terms, being not a Scio resident. Is that the proposed ProQuest site development?
The Smith property?
No, this is the Smith Farm property.
All University microfilm site.
No, this is not the University microfilms. This is the old Smith Farm property, and it's just west of the University Saginaw Forest, Third Sister Lake. It has two peat mining lakes on it, so we know it's kind of marshy area anyway.
This is a previously farmed property.
Correct. And there's houses here on the Liberty roadside of it already.
Is he still building houses on that site?
Yeah, you can see here that it's
Like a
already,
big senior.
they already have, this aerial photo doesn't show it, but there's already streets and curbs in there.
And tree removal.
Just happened, they wanted to put a building on where this NW 63 was.
Will they be connected to city water?
That's city water and city sewer now. It wasn't that way to start with. They were gonna have a sewage treatment pond, and we thought that was not a good idea to put more water in the ground that wasn't there to start with.
And it's shallow, the plume's shallow there, right?
It's very shallow inside.
How deep is it, Roger?
How deep is the plume?
In that
Well,
area where Scio?
It's on the surface. It's in the surface water, right here.
So do those homes have
Groundwater
basements?
contamination is at, let's say, the 40 foot plus or minus.
And it could be shallower.
The senior
according to this.
At what concentration?
Detectable levels.
Not, well, I'm just worried about it percolating into these new.
We
homes.
don't know because they're not looking at shallow groundwater.
And the senior place was gonna have underground parking,
Roger,
like, that's deep, I would.
You're right. You're right.
well, how come EGLE hasn't come on and said, wait a minute, this may not be a safe.
It's not a usable aquifer.
Yeah, but it still could percolate into the basement. With paper and trees.
As it could
It's near
here,
the surface.
as it could here with existing basements.
Yeah, right.
This is very much like the West Park area in Ann Arbor.
Right.
Yeah, it's like West
Well,
Point.
that's a concern that we have that is relatively recent. And I think that needs to be not just glossed over.
Is it
I
on
agree
the
with
agenda?
Smith Farm, I agree with
New homes should not be at risk.
I think it is on the agenda, in fact. Let's get through Ganston. What else,
All
Dan?
right.
All right.
Finish up, Dan, if you
Any
will.
other questions on the residential well sample, like 2020?
I'd like to see the coordinates and depths of the wells being sampled.
We don't have coordinates.
Somebody has the
I haven't gone
coordinates.
through all 100, 200 wells yet.
You have
look at the
approximate,
record.
we have the property center of the parcel coordinates. They're good enough?
Honestly,
If you provide a list of the addresses, I'm getting an updated list from Jim Murdy here, the assessor, to update this township parcel list I just showed him. Make sure that that's up to date, and we can cross-reference with that to know where the.
Roger, I can get you a list, just send them the list you sent me for approval.
Okay. Okay.
Anyway, but the depths is another issue. We don't know where a lot of these samples are.
Well,
where
we
a lot of
have
the
boring
wells-
logs, the boring logs are available in the state system. Jenny, when she sends requests to me, we have those available.
Sometimes we don't know whether it's the new well or the old well.
Right, if
If
it's
they
in,
exist.
if it's in the state system incorrectly, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So usually we have them in the county files. I know how to dig.
It would be nice to have that information in the well database, to say whether there's a well log available. I have that. for my version of it, but it should be in the, like, the official version.
Okay. Third quarter report revision.
If you remember, I believe that relates to the Gelman third quarter report, quarterly report that they submitted. I posted it, and when in the conversion to be posted, again, I just send it to be posted. I don't do that work. I'm not authorized to do that. It didn't convert very well. Layers were turned off. So that has been corrected, and the quarterly report that is posted is readable and with all the information that it was provided by Gelman.
Talking about the maps.
Mainly the maps, that's what there was.
This is, in fact, those maps. After the corrected version came through, I went through and retraced it. And
Oh, good.
so this is the 2D version, and the 3D version is right behind it. So thanks for getting that corrected.
Thanks for making this your hobby, Roger.
Yeah.
He's passing the hat around after the meeting.
I'm in for that.
$1 million, $1 million of consulting for free.
It's a little weird that Lemke.
Too bad not enough people use it.
I have an update that's not on the, if we're done with that, I have an update that is not on the agenda. EGLE was informed that Gelman will be rehabilitating the Wagner Road wells, TW8, extraction wells, TW18 and TW21. They started identifying in December. I do not have the December, I'm expecting the December NPDES, the information, the monthly reports from them here this week. But they informed us that the pumping rate at Wagner Road, there is a consent judgment requires a combined pumping of 200 gallons a minute. They started noticing that was going down, started evaluating that. And
TW18 here.
TW18 and TW21, both of those have to have a combined rate of 200 gallons a minute. Those are called in the consent judgment, the Wagner Road wells. And they informed us, like they are supposed to, and said we are starting to evaluate. They've come up that the wells have gotten plugged because of, wells get plugged.
You mean the screen?
The screens are plugged.
Mm-hmm.
So they will rehabilitate. They've hired Stearns Drilling Company to rehabilitate.
What does that mean?
Well, the rehabilitation I believe they are going to be utilizing will be an acid wash.
Okay.
Basically, just like at home when your water comes out of a spout and it has high minerals like calcium and manganese, you get the white stuff. Well, the same thing happens in the groundwater well. And so it limits water coming in. So they can't get the water in and pump it out that is required. So it's nothing abnormal. It's in the O&M, operation and maintenance plan that they have submitted to us. It's part of the day-to-day stuff when things like this happen. So they are scheduled, Gelman is scheduled to do that on January 13th, the 15th. They will shut those wells down to do it. Basically, they have to take the stuff, internal pumps.
You have to pull the pump.
Pull the pump, get that out, and then they will I believe what they're going to do is acid wash. Some other methods is to high-pressure wash, send a high-pressure wash down and just break up that stuff and pump it out. But
Is this what they used for the IW1 and IW2?
They did some rehabilitation, yeah, that's what they did. When they had the IW1 were rather than pumping wells, they were injection wells that were after contamination was cleaned up with their portable system. They injected it back down into the aquifer. That same thing, geochemical reaction occurred, and they had to go in many times, much more frequently to do this. And that's one of the reasons why they stopped doing injection, because it just turned into that the geochemistry, specific geochemistry of the site here does not lend itself to long-term injection without, there was many stopping and cleaning. So they just basically stopped that and just converted some of those to extraction. But that's the TW18 and TW21 are along Wagner Road right in front of their facility.
Just so you know, Dan, that was not the portable system.
Oh, okay.
That was the system that was in John Sykes's garage.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That was treating it evergreen.
All right, yeah, that was way before my time.
Before your time, right?
So are they still pumping currently? They're
Yes,
just
they're
gonna be
still pumping currently.
2 days.
As part of their notification, they also started pumping another extraction well in the same aquifer, TW17. TW17 is not out where TW18 is. TW17 is back in more toward the core area, but the concentrations that have been in TW17 and TW18 have been comparable. So they are pumping, trying to get as much out just to maintain, they're supposed to pump a treat. They voluntarily started up TW17, which is not a requirement. It's not a CJ. The TW18 and 21 were the two wells that are mentioned specifically, and the gallons per minute combination is mentioned specifically in the CJ. So they're pumping 17. They'll pump all the way out till, and then clean those two wells over a couple days, and then turn those back on and bring it up to the required 200 gallons a minute.
Are they going to be pumping from other wells
They'll
to make up the
continue.
difference?
Well, that's what I said. They started a minimum of 25 gallons a minute from TW17. I won't know stuff, until I get the monthly report. I'll know what days they pumped TW17. I'll know all that stuff and how many gallons a minute. But to try to pick up some of the lag, if you want to say, and do more pounds of dioxane removed, they voluntarily started 17, and that's in the same depth aquifer, the deepest aquifer, the water-bearing zone, the E aquifer. So they are, doing that right now.
Dan, when were these last cleaned? When did
This is the first time for these wells, if I understand I asked that same question, and they had, as far as maintenance, I asked for some maintenance records. They really hadn't been clean. They had done other maintenance, like pump maintenance and stuff like that, but they had not been clean. Like a pump motor was replaced, those types of things. So this is, if I understand and I'll get more information, I'll get it better with that monthly report. This is the first time they've had to do that. So they're following through with they notified us as they're required to do that. We got that notification approximately December 16th. It's not that things stopped. I mean, they kept pumping. It's just they started dropping below that 200 gallons. So they kicked on, tried to do, they couldn't get, both of them are if you want to say, need clean. So they couldn't change the pumping higher on one and the other. They just couldn't get the 200 gallons. So they it started another well up, kept those two pumping, and have since, I've kept those pumping. It's just, they'll have to clean, and we'll see for the next time, see how often, how that happens again, how soon that happens again. This is typical. I would expect that over the next years that you're going to have other notifications. I have another one. Just got it yesterday. TW23, which is along Maple Road. They started noticing that they're having the flow started dropping a little bit from what it had been. Now, TW23, there is not a required, at that well, a required pumping rate. But they started noticing, hey, it's dropping off, and they're in the process of evaluating that. So I don't know whether that would need cleaned here in the near future. TW23 is a new well that's probably just a couple of years old. It was a replacement when they did a redevelopment over there. We had to move, they had to do new extraction wells because some of the other ones, the property owners were redeveloping the building along Maple there.
It was LA Fitness, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, that was the LA Fitness, I think, was that put in?
Yeah.
It's pretty busy.
So
We
this
lost
is
4
not
wells.
out of the ordinary. This is what, these pumps are going, extraction is going 24/7. So it's a typical for this glacial sediments, glacial geology. That's the only other information that's not on there that I have ready for tonight. Anybody have any questions?
Well, I'm glad to see TW17 is pumping. And 2 of those wells that you mentioned, you might have seen as I was clicking through, the Parks Pavilion is going up even though the gallons per minute is going down?
Well, those are right across the street, TW 18 and 21, right across the street from the property, so. We expect that's one of the reasons they are located there, is they are the Wagner wells that are mentioned in the CJ that are.
It was about 500 is the maximum and 700 in 2018. I don't have 2019 data yet, so that's and then for the TWs over here on Wagner Road, TW 18 was it?
TW 18 and TW 21. 18 was where they first noticed it. And TW 18 does more of the bigger, of the 200 gallons, it's the one that pumps more.
TW 21 is going back up again after being around 100 and some parts per billion for several years. It's now up to 400 last year. So even though the pumping rate might be going down, the parts per billion is going up. So it's really important to get those cleaned and pick up more.
That would mean that more pounds of dioxide are being pumped out and treated.
Right.
How much are they pumping right now total?
They're pumping approximately, average for 2019, I just got that information today, was 474 gallons a minute, 475, let's say plus or minus 475. It's right around 475 average for all of 2019.
Which is they've been doing for several years.
They're allowed to go to 1,500?
1,300.
1,300?
The NPD, the current NPDES permit, which, as you know, is
under review.
Under review, the old one, it was over in 2018, October. It's still being implemented, utilized, because that's what happens.
So what's the number for that?
I believe it's 1,300 gallons per minute is the total that they're allowed under their NPDES permit. If you remember, the court allowed basically in 2011 with the last modification to the CJ, the court allowed Gelman to not really to adjust their pumping rate to achieve objectives, not really identified a gallons per minute, just at selected areas, just certain extraction wells, TW 18 and 21, 200 gallons was mentioned. But in that 2011 CJ modification, Gelman was allowed to go from 1,300 down to 475.
Yes, it's because
and
aquifer cleanup is not the goal. It's
related to the objectives of the CJ. And the objectives of the CJ are non-expansion to the west, utilizing expansion defined by those compliance monitoring wells, and then the CJ currently does not allow concentrations greater than 2,800 past Maple Road.
In fact, yeah, we'll get to that in a minute, but the fact that it's percolating up at West Park doesn't seem to be an issue, but that's something we'll have to talk about.
Well, any other discussion on Dan's updates?
Okay, next agenda item. I'm not sure who put it on for the Allen Creek Drain MS4 permit violation.
Dan Pignell put that on because turns out that the drain commissioner is in violation of the MS4 requirements.
Do you want me to read the permit request?
Sure.
So the MS4 permittee is required to haul any and all illicit discharge into a storm drain, Allen Creek in this case. An illicit discharge is defined as any discharge to or seepage into an MS4 drain that is not composed entirely of stormwater or uncontaminated groundwater, except discharges pursuant to an NPDES permit. Under the MS4 permit, no docks and contamination, it would seem no docks and contamination at any level would be legal to infiltrate or seep into the MS4 drain. One of the things about this drain is that in my discussions over the years with Allen Creek folks and some former drain officers, is that the pipe going into West Park that Dan tested and came back at as high as 22 part per billion, picks up a lot of groundwater. So Dan, to his credit, would go out during a drought or low rain event to try and capture groundwater, not stormwater. And when you stand over that drain in a drought, there's water gushing through there. So one of the options that Dan Bicknell has talked about and Roger I've talked about is, this notion that they could line the pipe to keep the groundwater from getting into the drain. In this case, that doesn't seem feasible because these stubs were added to the pipe so that that high flow of groundwater wouldn't undermine basements and wouldn't undermine roadways. And so when they installed that pipe, they wanted to reduce the effect of all this undermining from groundwater. There's been a lot of basements in that area that had to be replaced or partially replaced because of groundwater infiltration. So Dan had talked to the EPA. I guess he talked to the EGLE, or
Christy
Roger.
Allwin.
Surface water.
Yeah.
Christy Allwin, he talked to Christy Allwin.
Okay, so.
She is the MS4 program permit coordinator.
So I didn't talk to them. Dan Bicknell did, and his impression from their conversations is indeed the MS4 permit requires that no contamination be allowed into that pipe. And that's a major question we have, and that wonder, is EGLE's position that this is a MS4?
Well, what the drain commissioner has the authority to do is to require a permit. It would require, because of the permit, you require that
Be
discharge
stopped.
into the drain be stopped.
Or cleaned up
Yeah, I think
before it gets in.
Vince, this is a good topic, I just don't, Dan isn't the right guy to answer it. So
No, it's
I'm
not for
wondering if
him,
we can
because it's a
get
different division.
Evan Pratt or
But he never
Christie or
comes.
someone from.
So how do we find out?
It's just recovered.
I mean, he doesn't come and he's not doing it, so what happens then? It's just okay?
Well, CARD as a group, I guess, could petition. We could ask
Yeah,
for
I'll send an
clarification.
invite.
He could have the county
I think he knows he's
petition.
invited.
You were going to invite him at one
He watches the
Invited plenty of
videos.
times, yeah,
So he said.
we
He watches the video of the
scrape
meeting.
number.
So,
Or ask for an
so he
email
will
request.
watch this video presumably and learn that he does have the authority to require that be stopped.
Well, he knows, he answered the email.
That's true.
He sent the impression that he was not required to deal with this. Now, his response in email seems to be that he feels like there may be an issue. I've not gotten any indication what his actions are going to be, if any.
Should the city of Ann Arbor be concerned?
I would think that that would be a concern of the city, and the city has been notified of this, as far as I know.
Washtenaw County is the permit holder.
Yeah, it's a county drain.
So there's contamination getting into the drain that is not legally allowed to be there. It's going to be a difficult situation, and people don't want to deal with it, but I think it's obviously not a situation that we want to see continue. And the upshot is that there's probably the plume flowing. I mean, I think the understanding is that this is probably from Gelman. And it's going to be going up. And it's going to be going through the west side of the city at near surface. And we want, I think CARB would like to see something done about it so that we don't have basements contaminated.
So here's the doxing that's heading towards West Park in an aquifer that's shallow enough that the ground surface falls away, exposing this dioxane before it gets to West Park. And the drain may already be picking up some of that in order to get, 22 parts per billion?
22.
In
That's a high
the
number.
drain down here. And there are no other wells, shallow wells between MW 82S and where this dioxin is being found in the drain.
Is this being talked about in the secret meetings that we don't know about? Or-
Probably not.
No?
Here's what Dan Bicknell
We can't tell you.
I know.
You probably have seen this before, but this shows you how the Allen Creek is a very steep watershed. This is like, up here is Betts Park. This is West Park. And as you go towards the river, these layers get sliced off like a layer cake. So you think of a layer cake, and it's cutting away, and this is actually Paul's own map that shows the yellow is where water wants to flow, the green is where it's probably clay, and so it's coming out apparently at West Park. If you go upstream, it's not as easy to find it. But at Betts Park, we had 1,000 parts per billion at one time. And that plume is moving to the west, or to the east, towards West Park and beyond. A lot of wet basements on the old west side, a lot of wet basements on the west side, near west side. And our concern is that this contamination will go up, percolate into basements, evaporate with the water, the dioxin will evaporate with the water. Bob Bailey, Dr. Bailey, has done some analyses, and he's going to be talking with someone at the U of M, hopefully in the next week or so.
Next week.
And he came up with a number that's much lower than the DEQ's final number. Their first number was 29, then they went to 1,900.
Right.
Bob is finding that maybe 100 is the actual level where they should start doing something near the house. So if we're at 22, and it was at 1,000 at Betts Park, that's a concern of ours. This could migrate it into the west side with a lot of wet basement. Doesn't have to be a flooded basement, doesn't have to be a basement holding a lot of water. It's just evaporating through seepage that comes in, it evaporates with the water.
And I do
It's in a
need to
confined space.
clarify that the 22 parts per billion in Allen Creek drain is in that enclosed drain and not in the shallow groundwater around there. When they-
That's our interpretation, though, that it probably is in the shallow groundwater, because
Well,
there's tests upstream of that site that did not find any 1,4 dioxide. It's at West Park where they found it, okay?
The
And
last
we
tests
did
at
it- we
West
did
Park
it-
were non-detected. They did detect it in the shallow groundwater near Waterworks Park at 5.
In
up to 3 parts per
2016,
billion.
we did a shallow
So not
groundwater
22.
investigation.
So we're not
where we-
downplaying it, we do
One
hear
person
it,
at a
we
time.
know it. I just want to clarify, there's no confirmed 22 parts per billion in the shallow groundwater at West Park.
It seems like from people who've looked at it, that is probably a good assumption. It would be nice if we had a more thorough investigation, but we haven't done that, and so we have to make suppositions.
Well, I will point out to everybody that this is not part of the consent judgment. The consent judgment did not consider, did not consider shallow groundwater coming into people's basements with
Contaminated.
dioxin.
Given that we're going to have the meeting on the 16th, could CAR send a written formal request to whoever the responsible parties are perceived to be, including the city and the county, and copy Congresswoman Debbie Dingle on it, so that there is an actual request and identifying problems?
Well, we can send what we sent a couple of years ago.
And point out that
Well,
this
we've
is
made
not part of the
requests,
consent.
I'll just-
But we might not have sent it to Debbie.
We've made these requests, city council and the mayor and the city administrator and the stormwater facility people at the city have gotten those requests from the Allen Creek Watershed Group.
How long ago?
Last week, or last month.
Okay.
For the last 8 months, last year and a half, we've been notifying the city that this is a concern of ours. The CART has been discussing it, and there's no action either from EGLE or the city or Gelman. And it's probably not illegal at this point because it's not above 100.
And it's not a green slime, so people aren't worried about it.
Well, I would say, do it again and copy the Congresswoman and do it coming up to the meeting on the 16th, and also copy Ryan.
So we know that there are a lot of, I've been in the Allen Creek group for the last 30 years, close to 30. A lot of wet basements all over, and it's because of this, because you have this glacial tilt.
Yeah.
And these houses are going to be exposed.
We understand that, you told us that.
Well, no, some people don't understand.
She's making a single request.
Okay.
Which is that you send a single succinct request to those parties that they address the amount of dioxin in that drain and mention the permit.
The
Just
violation.
do that one more time without any other issues in
Well,
email.
we've said it to Evan Pratt,
Yeah.
like, multiple times.
Okay,
But you want us to follow
We'll go
up
back
on it.
and,
So if you would do that one distinct thing.
Elected
we will-
officials
we will
are
follow up.
elected
Yeah.
to do action.
But you know, he's saying, send it to Debbie. So we'll see what we sent to
I'll tell you what, I'll
everybody,
print it
all
out
the
on a
elected
gold
officials,
leaf
and then we'll.
piece of
CC
paper
it.
and make sure it looks really nice, has a stamp, has a little bow on it, if that's what you need.
Blue bow for clean water.
This has been out there forever.
I know it has, and I have heard about it, but I'm just trying to elevate it and get action right now. And I think the timing is right. Maybe it is focused on it.
What action would you have the polluter take?
Clean it up.
I mean,
They have to clean it up by law. It has to be cleaned up. They cannot allow that contaminated groundwater to go into the Allen's Creek. It violates their permit.
Right.
The county permit, Gelman is in violation. And the county doesn't seem to want to take up the issue.
Well, first of all, we don't have enough data other than this MW82S. And
So-
under the consent judgment, apparently we can't force the company to put more monitoring in, like Dan Bicknell has a work plan that's been out there for 3 years now.
Yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
there's the two similar but separate issues here. One is the shallow groundwater, and then the other is the contamination in the drain system.
Well, they're connected.
They
Okay.
are.
If the
Different
dioxin
issues.
wasn't
Separate,
there,
that's
it wouldn't be a
horrible.
problem
We,
in the drain.
we have the authority to try to enforce the one.
Yep.
And the one is the dioxin in the drain.
Yep.
So
But the
if
problem
you, if you
is-
separate that one issue from everything else you told us tonight and make that request one more time, we will follow up on it.
Typically, what you would do in this situation, I wouldn't recommend it, but a lot of municipalities would, they would line the pipe. So you can't get groundwater in
But you
there.
already said that that's not really
It's
practical
not feasible in
in
this
this
case. Okay,
site.
so they're kind of in
So
a
you gotta get rid of
situation-
the dioxin.
We're in a situation where you have to really deal with the groundwater. You just can't ignore it, like some municipalities would. And that comes into play where, who's gonna clean up the groundwater?
Well, I think an important point that you're mentioning is that we have problems that are beyond the consent judgment.
Correct.
Right.
So even if we got everything we were asking for in the consent judgment, we wouldn't be addressing this.
Correct.
Okay, and I think that's important.
Well,
To bring
we've
to
been
everyone's
bringing it up
attention.
for the last 2 or 3 years, and we think it's important too.
Right.
But before next week's meeting, especially.
Okay. Roger's update.
This is for the new people, by the way, this green area here, these are additional layers in my Google Earth mashups. One is the near surface groundwater. And the other one is the floodplain. The floodplain is this turquoise one here. But the residual between the top of the water table and the surface, when it's within 10 feet, it shows up in these areas here. These, again, are from Gelman's own maps from 2006, 2007. Shows that there's groundwater very near the surface or at the surface. If it wasn't for the drains, this would be running into a surface drain. So if you go upstream a little bit from that, you'll see there are bubbles of those layers that get pretty close to MW82S. But there's, again, no shallow monitoring well between here and where these exposures are likely to happen first. So I just wanted to clarify that. By the way, you're an engineer, you can download this KMZ. First download Google Earth Pro, which is free on your computer, and then you can open up the the Google Earth file and do all the same stuff that I've been doing here today. And I'm adding new features all the time, so. I find it's a good decision tool because you can click on a well, you can find out the information about it, what the maximum parts per billion is per year, and you can, I've added a link here to the well log, so you can get to the well log directly from Google Earth. And I've also added layers for all the cross-section diagrams that have been produced by the company over the years. And that kind of shows you the layers of aquifers. And those also have links. So you can see where areas that there might be high parts per billion and like maybe only one cross-section that goes through that area. You say, why is that? You can go and you can click on the cross-section. And you can zoom in and see the different layers and see which wells are involved.
You put this all in.
So this is all Gelman stuff that I had to hand trace each of these paths to get it on Google Earth because they don't export their shape files or anything like that. But it's a great decision tool because then you can see, well, maybe we don't know what's going on there. There are some places too where they have several cross sections going through the same place. And there's one example I just did today, I don't know if I can get to it here, but where it shows the cross section, and it says where where it thinks the bedrock is. On one of these cross sections, it shows the bedrock way down here. On the other cross section, for the very same packet, it shows that between the same two wells, it shows the bedrock, 80 feet higher. Wait a minute. You're not even consistent within your own report. I'll be sending that out pretty soon. This is the kind of thing we've been having to deal with, where it's kind of, I don't want to just say sloppy work, it's incompetent work that we're having to deal with. There's been cases where they have the elevations wrong, for the surface elevation, the company.
Oh, okay, I just wanted.
Or their consultants. There's also a
But
whole.
not EGLE, I just wanted to clarify.
No.
Well, EGLE doesn't do this.
Yeah, okay.
And, Dan's got enough to do. He doesn't have time to check all of this stuff.
We, on any site, whether it's Gelman or any site, we consider us reviewers.
Oh,
So the liable party hires a consultant, they do all the work, send it in to us, we would review that. Now, in our review, maybe we should have, years ago, identified what Roger caught, and we didn't.
Well, but I can't really blame you because I can't imagine spending money for a consultant to do what I do.
Right. So that, I just.
I can imagine that.
I clarify, EGLE is,
Because I've seen the consultant, in fact, all the Gelman reports are consultant reports.
Yeah.
And I find mistakes all the time. So what's the difference between the company going out and getting a consultant and the state going out and getting a consultant? The consultants have to have a full view of this, and they will never have a full view of this as those of us in the community that have been studying this for 27 years.
And care more. I mean, I don't mean to say that any.
Well, I have a reason to care
Everyone else has
because
other jobs too, and.
here's where I live.
Right.
I live right here.
Right.
In the water.
My well is right here.
Mhm.
The creek is getting closer to my well every year as the erosion happens. And my well is about the same depth as the Breezewood well. And the Breezewood well's already contaminated. Now, am I gonna go out and spend a couple $100 a year to sample my well? No, I'm not gonna do that. And it should be far enough downstream, it shouldn't matter, right? But who knows?
Can we give Roger a free well sample?
Yeah.
But do I want to find dioxin? Because what's it going to do for me? Nothing. What's it do? What happened to when you found 1 part per billion on Breezeway? What did that guy get? He got lower household value. And it had already gone down $30,000 of assessment before that happened. Just
Well,
from
the other issue, Roger, though, is along the creeks, there's giving and taking going on.
That's why we think-
There's contamination in the creek.
this contamination is closer to the creek than it is the prior edge of the plume.
Because they're allowed to
We
dump it
don't
at
know.
7.2 and not 0 or.
Well, they were
Discharge.
discharging much higher earlier when they weren't
Well,
cleaning
they
it
have a
up.
daily, they can have a daily peak, right, Dan?
Yeah, the current NPDES permit has limits of a daily max of 22 ppm, I believe, approximately.
Yeah.
And then
that could
and
reach out.
consistently they have to meet 7.
Well, I think
And
what-
their
they have
records show they're about 5, 4 or 5.
well, they have a 7 as the daily average.
Yes.
Now, they're using, they used to treat to non-detect
Yeah,
for,
the oxidation.
for, I forget what year it was, before they switched over to ozone.
I think it was
Oxidation.
They should still be doing that in their
Yeah.
secret meetings, just to not let you know.
And before that, we had an agreement, because I helped work it out with the
Dump it in
company.
a body of water that's going.
I had an agreement negotiated with the company for 0 to 3 parts per billion. 3 parts per billion or less was going to be the discharge if they use creek as a discharge. That agreement actually got signed with the township. And then when Paul came in and took over, they reneged on that agreement. And the township had no recourse just to let it go. But we actually had because we knew the company could treat to non-detect. They've been doing it for years at Evergreen. And they were treating from up to 500 parts per billion down to non-detect. And what's the average going in from the Red Pond now? 400 and some?
It's, let's say 500 plus or minus.
Yeah, so we know with a bigger system that they have at the core, if they use UV oxidation instead of ozone oxidation, they could treat to non-detect. So this permit that's about to be renewed, then instead of being 7.2 or about 7, as its average daily maximum, should be maybe 3.5. Because we know that that's what the best available technology can do. Company's not going to want to do that because it costs them twice as much. They claim that it's going to be using more chemicals, more pre-treat, more post-treat. Well, not really. When you look at ozone, there's a lot of ozone problems too. Not the least of which is you create a new carcinogen, bromate, that you're putting out there, and nobody knows what happens to that. There's no half-life information for that in the real world. And speaking of half-lives, the company not too long ago quoted a half-life value for dioxin in anaerobic conditions. Now, the thought is when dioxin's in water where there's a lot of oxygen, it will break down faster. And when there's no oxygen, it tends to be one of the forever compounds. But their half-life they were using was about 2 years for anaerobic. In other words, worst case scenario. Well, if you take the amount of dioxin that was left, let's just take the amount of dioxin they've already cleaned up and removed. 113,000 pounds of dioxin they removed. Let's say all of that existed the day that this was, quote, discovered. And let's go back 2 years. If the half-life, if it's gone, half of it's gone in 2 years, you go back 2 years, it should be twice as much. So what's twice 113,000 pounds? 226,000 pounds. Okay, so that takes it back to 1984, let's say. And let's go back 2 more years, 1982, how much dioxin went in there? double that. And let's go back 2 more years to 1980, and it's about how much dioxin they used over 20 years. And if you keep going back, they must have used a heck of a lot more dioxin than what this 850,000 pounds. So if they're gonna continue to use that half-life, then they better come clean about how much dioxin they really used. In reality, I think what's really happening is that the half-life that you have from some other place in the country or world does not apply to Michigan's groundwater. We have a couple 100 feet of natural sand filters that take out oxygen and nutrients, but let dioxin and PFAS and stuff like that go through.
This is a nasty chemical. The EPA, they had thousands of
So
chemicals.
what I'm getting to is that
Not
when Larry Lemke says there seems to be more natural attenuation, if that's at all based on any half-life data that's out there, I wouldn't trust it. I would think more that what looks like natural attenuation is actually storage in semi-aquifer materials. Dimicton and silty clay, where the water doesn't go through as fast, but there's dioxin in there. And what happens after the dioxin from the core sites are cleaned up sometime in the future, you have redispersion from these other less permeable layers. And that's been discussed by a couple of researchers out east.
Has Larry Lemke said that he thinks that?
He actually quoted that same group of people. But we know that seems to be happening here, but we haven't removed the core dioxin. The people that did this redispersion study said, well, after the core's gone, there might be another 70 years that you have trailing dioxin, even after the core dioxin's gone. We don't even have the core dioxin gone here yet. And you don't have to go very far to see why, because there's no purging at rates from these higher concentration areas, these purple areas, in the marshy area, in the core area.
And the soils.
And up here, that's heading north towards our major water supply. In fact, if you look at this one, where's the well that makes this shape of this plume of dioxin at Gelman? Where's the data that says this is the shape of that plume? Has anybody discussed that at all in any of these secret negotiations?
The method whereby the curve is formed has been discussed. It's been understood that, this is no secret, that they had to determine a
guesstimation. A guesstimation.
Well, I mean, we've had this conversation at CARD, that, yeah, that's what it is. We're trying to visualize.
This is their depiction of where the plume is.
Yeah.
Of course you know it doesn't. There's
Yeah,
no
we know it
data to
doesn't look
support
like
this.
that.
This is done by a computer program,
Sure.
feeding in some parameters, but where's the data to get that? Where are all the monitoring wells? These monitoring wells that I've shown here are just the current ones, because there's a lot of monitoring wells that are no longer red. And I actually separated that out just recently. So we have, these are the wells. Let me turn off the cross section so they don't get in the way here. Cross sections. Take away those. And so here we just have the plumes by themselves. And where are the wells? These are the monitoring wells that are currently being sampled in 2019. You want to see which ones are not being sampled anymore?
Yeah.
Those. You want to see ones that aren't even in the database that used to be sampled? Go back to the 95 database. Come on. Boom. Well, of course they had to sample these back in 95 because there weren't enough monitoring wells. These are homeowner wells and supply wells for businesses.
that's how they were finding it.
Right.
Was the homeowner wells.
And the, the business supply wells. And the yellow are the ones where there's detectable levels, and the white ones are non-detect.
And what's the highest, what are the purple, for people that don't know, it's like, what, how many parts per 46?
You want me to turn the key back? Here's the key. So there are 2,000 to 5,000 or more parts per billion.
So Roger, we have 5 minutes left, and there's still one more agenda item, so.
Let me see if there's anything else that I haven't covered.
Thank you.
Seeing as how a lot of my time got taken up by other people. Maybe I should go first.
Oh, in the calendar, Jenny.
Yeah.
As far as what's new, I mentioned a couple of things. I have a list of about 200 other items. That list is new. And I don't want to take time at the card meeting to go through all those. But they're things that affect this site. By the way, the third quarter report, what I've done as of the third quarter report, Dan, is I went through all the prior quarterly reports, going back to when they were first generated back around 2000 or 1990 something, 98. And I pulled out the section that says, here's what's going to happen the next 3 months. And I've separated those out. And I'd like somebody to go through and see, of those things they promised to do in the next 3 months, did they happen? I don't want the DQ to do it because they don't have the time. But among citizen volunteers, if you want to get involved, here's a task that I've laid out. Go back and look and see how we've been doing with the DNR, DQ, DNRA, DQ, EGLE taking charge of this cleanup. Because those were things that were in the quarterly report, and I think it would be interesting to go back and see for the things that the company said they were going to do, how many of them happened, how many of them didn't happen. So I'll give up my floor to the calendar. So we're talking about meeting calendar. Jenny, there was a time November was going to be a problem.
So November comes to be a problem. So the quarterly meetings are held every 3 months with EGLE. And like Dan's here from EGLE tonight, and comes to the monthly meetings, but like a lot of EGLE people come on the quarterly meetings. They're held at the daytime, so including the AG comes. So but we run into a problem in November during election years because EGLE has the day off, and then when we try to reschedule the meeting in conflict with a Scio Township meeting or an Ann Arbor City meeting, it's just hard. So I was wondering why we don't just, if you were all okay with it, if we just shift a month for all the quarterly meetings. So I would propose to keep the February meeting next month. I already have a room reserved for that one.
Are you saying shift the day of the month?
Shift the quarterly meetings to the next month. So instead of being
I
February,
see,
June,
I see.
September, and December, they would end up being March, June, September, and December.
I see. So
But-
have the same day, times,
Yes.
except the quarterly would be just
The quarterly
shift
would
of a
never
month.
be in November anymore, and it hopefully won't be a problem.
So you'd be shifting it to December,
Yes.
and you expect less problem in the?
Well, you still have a monthly, it's a place of a monthly meeting.
Oh, it's first. Okay.
Instead of a monthly meeting, it would be a quarterly meeting.
So I
No, I
shouldn't,
I know what you were saying, though, Jack, but it is early.
December always is complicated for scheduling anything, but if it's the first week of December, I guess that's not.
yeah, and then June to not July, because I was trying to think of other holidays that could conflict, so it wouldn't conflict with the 4th.
What if you shifted it the other way?
We could, but then, we could.
Because this would have been a quarterly meeting.
Correct. But I still propose to keep next month, February quarterly meeting. So then I guess we have to decide if we want another one in April or June.
Well, see, that's why you want to move it the direction you want it to move, because you don't want to have a 5-month delay or whatever.
Well, so that's the question. Either we're going to have an extra month or they're going to be 1 month closer.
It's going to
I'm
be
pretty
a
much
2-month or
fine
5-month or something.
either way. So, but I wanted to get input on that, so. And then I can make a meeting and put it on the website.
It probably doesn't matter, I mean.
Why don't we lay it out?
This year,
I think it's fine.
choose this set or this set.
Isn't that complicated?
Why don't we just decide that?
Yeah, just decide.
I think
With
it's
December is my feeling.
Well, it will be December, well, okay,
And
so.
And then
September.
we just keep it that way the rest for the next 300
Okay, so
years.
if it wasn't March, June, September, and December, it would be,
Everybody 4th of July.
So the one after February would be what?
and then January gets tricky with the new year.
Yeah, I like the March, June, September, December.
June is not a bad month.
So it'd be February and then,
Yeah, I think you did well. I vote for.
Yeah.
Okay,
I make a motion to accept the calendar as originally proposed.
Okay.
but
Now-
I'm not sure about the gap between February and
it's
June.
one extra month.
Yeah, instead of May.
We'll make it.
But there's a lot of things happening, so I'm wondering
We
if.
still have our monthly meetings.
We still meet monthly, anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
You wouldn't want to be the
Dan
next
is generally
month,
here.
2 months
Unless
later.
it's a flu again.
I don't want to say anything.
And I'm sure if anything critical comes up that we need someone other than Dan to report on, we can invite them. Eagle's always been very willing to come work.
So we're really deciding, should the one after February be April or June?
Correct. But if it's April, then we end up with July, which doesn't work, and in January, so.
No, I was suggesting maybe have 2-month intervals.
Okay.
No.
No?
But then are we still gonna move the November monthly meeting because of the election day?
Yes.
Or are we gonna do it that night? Yeah, we don't want to do it that night.
No, maybe we just cancel it on
Or
election
just
year.
cancel on election
Or
day?
see what, yeah.
We
It's a
made
lot
it-
easier to cancel a monthly meeting
Yeah.
for people than try,
Right.
especially if Eagle Management and other people
Yeah,
that I
let's
invite.
make sure.
Or potentially, if it's just a regular evening meeting, if Dan can't attend, he can send his updates ahead of time, and I have enough to relay that to the
We
group.
can have the election day meeting at the session room or something.
There you go. Jim.
Oh, you're
Oh,
raising
you
your
said-
hand
said Jim
because he
Bo's
likes that
decision.
idea. All right. All right.
Eagle doesn't have any, whatever your schedule is, there's no objection, I checked.
All right. Anybody have any problem with that? Also, June is the
June,
next.
September, December.
You know what?
Moving forward, this year only it'll be February instead of March, because I already have the room reserved.
Yeah.
And I've already let people know that February, like the NPDES people, and so they kind of have it on their schedule.
All right.
Looking at this calendar reminds me that you can actually have multiple calendars, and we could have a card calendar.
We
and
actually
people
have a
could-
card calendar.
A Google card calendar?
Yes.
Well, why don't you send out a note or put us all on it, and we can then opt to go in it or not.
Oh, like I do with Michigan basketball games. Where
Absolutely.
it pops up on my phone and.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
I have,
Yes, you could do that. The secretary can do that.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how to do that.
I think you just add people to the calendar.
Yeah.
Once we know the dates, we put them in and it's recurring. So you put in 3 recurring.
But you have to make her an owner.
Oh, yeah, well, no, she should do it through card.
But you said we already have a card calendar. Whoever has the card calendar has to make the
She
secretary
has
an
access to
owner.
the card that you see.
Is it a calendar up?
Is it a Google calendar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does she get access to the Cadillac too?
Anyway, it would be great.
Okay, that's a good idea.
It just pops up on your,
If you like it.
you can turn it off.
Okay, so the next card meeting is Tuesday, February 4th. It's a daytime meeting, it's a quarterly meeting with
Where
EGLE.
at?
It's at the Washtenaw County building here next door across
Was
the
that
driveway,
basement?
in the basement.
Oh,
The big room.
Is that what you said?
Did everybody sign?
Thank you for reminding us that. We said that.
Is the old room been updated? We're ever going to go back there?
Not in the foreseeable future.
Okay. Well, this is fine because we can fit
Maybe by the
everybody.
end of this year.
Imagine if everybody tried to fit in that little room. Even the downstairs.
So this is the
Yeah.
basement, you said?
Yes. So we will have another meeting room like that we can access. I can't say that'll be the same one in the future. Just don't have a timeline. I'm hoping before the end of 2020.
Send me the list of the dates.
Yeah.
Because then I'll just forward it.
Thanks for working on your posters.
All right.
Did you have a nice day?
It's about 20 minutes. It's about EGLE.
Nice meeting you too.
And like, worked in Lansing, a little less mild, but I don't like Lansing.